Alright, so last week we started Masechet Chagiga, and I gave a handout last week, and those who missed it. Probably the more important of the two is the copy of the introduction from Art Scroll. You didn't get this one? Okay. And it looks the way it is because it is here we go. It's a picture from an iPhone of the front two pages. And the key here is that there are three different karbanos that one brings when one is an Ola Regel. There's a carbon Olas Re'iyah, which is burnt up completely, and says V'lo Yero Fanai Rekam, you shall not come empty-handed to me. So this is the carbon that goes to Hashem. You see nothing from it. It's a complete tax write-off, so to speak. Then there are two other karbanos. There's the Shalmei Chagiga. It says Shalosh Pamim Bashana. It says Shalosh Regalim Tachog Li Bashana. You'll celebrate. Celebration is karbanos, and from the Shalmei Chagiga you got to eat. And then there was also Shalmei Simcha, and that was to ensure that there was enough meat to go around with all the people that were there. Simcha is to enhance the amount of celebration that there was. In terms of the Olas Riyah, so there's a machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Was there a minimum? How small was the minimum share for the Olas Riyah, and how much was for the Karban Chagiga? So the mission itself, and maybe we'll just run through the mission again quickly, because the Gemara referred to it. The mission as machlokas whether the largest share should be for the Olas Riyah, which is all to God, and if God gets it all, it's more significant of the two karbanos, or should it be for Shalmei Chagiga, which you're going to get to eat, which logic would say there should be larger, right, that you can keep it for yourself and eat it amongst your party. The mission itself really enumerates the different people who are chayiv to go to Ole Regel, and it enumerates those who are chayiv by listing those who are excluded. So the Mishnah, I'll just read through it quickly, because the Gemara really is basically a discussion about all the different types of people who are excluded here. Hakol chayav b'riyah chutz micheresh shodev v'katan, except for a cheresh. And the Gemara's today's topic will talk about what type of cheresh it is. There's a cheresh that is eino shomea umedaber, can't hear but can't speak, and then there's a cheresh eino shomea ve'eino medaber. A person who is a complete mute is called an elaim. So you can have a person who can hear but can't speak. That's called an elaim. But cheresh, the terms can be confusing because the same term is used, and in fact you'll see from the Gemara that the Mishnah includes here in this word cheresh the two types. The Gemara is going to introduce what's called the chisurim mechsarei. You have to read the Mishnah as if something is missing or included in a sub-statement of a statement that's not really clear. So, but cheresh, once again, just keep in mind, the cheresh can be cheresh she'eino shomea ve'eino medaber, cheresh she'eino shomea u'medaber, eino shomea u'medaber. Okay. So then we have, and about the difference between the two. The difference between the two is cheresh she'eino shomea ve'eino medaber. Clearly, it shows that he has no ability whatsoever to communicate, and therefore is probably going to be completely excluded from what's going on. I'll give the over. They're Dapei Gemara. Dapim. Okay. All right, and so chutz micheresh v'katan. So shot is obviously a person who is incapable of thought processes. Katan is a person on the bar mitzvah, and we'll see actually what it really means. It means, in this case, a katan who's even less than the age of chinuch. Tumtum and androgynous, people we don't know what their definition is. Tumtum is a person who is, you can't tell if they're male or female. Androgynous has both genitalia, so they're, once again, we're not quite sure what they are. And then we have Nashim Avadim Shem Shuchrarim. Nashim are women. Avadim Shem Shuchrarim are non-Jewish slaves which were not freed. And the Gemara we did last week, which we're not going to get to do today because we did it last week, says this is going to include even a Eved that's half free. In other words, an Eved who's owned by two people, one master frees him, the other master doesn't free him. So as well, that person is also can bring the carbon, can be Ola Regel, and in fact you have to actually free the second half of the person. Chiger is a person who's lame. Suma is a person who's blind. Chole is a person who's sick. The chole and the zaken are people who physically can't go up. So chole is a sick person, a weak person. Zaken is an elderly person who can't go up. And then mishenu yachalalos baraglav, a person who can't physically walk up. Okay, they could be healthy, they could be not sick, but they can't go. And then the Gemara says, what's the definition of a katan? Is a katan yachalakovak. What's the definition of a chatan? A person can't go al ksefo shalaviv on the shoulders of his father. V'lalas mishleim laharbayit. Can't go from mishleim up to harabayit. According to BAYT Shammai, BAYT Hillel mim koshin yochel lechos biyadav shalaviv v'lalot mishleim laharbayit. BAYT Hillel says no, he actually has to walk. So he has to walk from Yerushalayim to Harabayit. The reason is because Harabayit could be extended to be larger to include parts of Yerushalayim. So therefore it's considered as if he's in part of Harabayit. Shenamar shalash regalim. This says 3 regalim. Regel comes from walking, so he has to be able to walk a little bit. And then the last piece of the Mishnah, BAYT Shammai omrim horiya shtei kesef Chagiga mar kesef. This is why I told you machloket BAYT Shammai and BAYT Hillel, which is larger. The carbon riyah, the larger one has to be 2 silver coins, and the Chagiga is 1 silver coin. BAYT Hillel omrim riyah mar kesef Chagiga shtei kesef. BAYT Hillel says no, the other way around. Carbon riyah is the smaller amount, 1 mar, and the Chagiga is 2 kesef, because you're going to be eating it among the people themselves. So last week we had done the first piece of the we did Beis on Aleph, which talks about this half Eved, and he was going to be Meshuchlar. And the Gemara's conclusion, by the way, is if you have this kind of person, you force the master,
the one that didn't free him,
to free him, and set up a star which has a repayment system built in, because he's obviously going to suffer loss, because a person who is half slave and half free can't marry a shifcha, can't marry a free woman, so he'll end up being by himself. And that goes against the ethic of what the Torah is telling us. And that's called one definition of what tikkun olam is, a different definition than what we usually think of tikkun olam, which is used very loosely today. This is tikkun olam for a human being. Okay. So we're going to go on to Beis and Beis, Bet Nomad Bet, 2, 4, 6 line. Chutz mi cheresh shotev v'katan. Okay, everybody see it? Bet Nomad Bet, 6 lines on the top. So the topic of the Gemara is actually going to be, what is the definition of this cheresh? Who is this cheresh?
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So the Gemara says, Katani cheresh, dumya d'shota v'katan. So the Gemara wants to try to understand what type of cheresh is it. So the Gemara first thinks it means that's a cheresh, and because it's cheresh, shota v'katan, all 3 of them must be similar. Right, must be the same category, but it's not always true. They just get lumped together, right? And
they go together with everything.
They go right.
Whenever there's some mitzvah,
Nashim and Alvadim go together. Tumtum and Adroyus go together. Correct, right? Okay. This, by the way, this leaves a lot of discussion that women, there's a charge about women because they're included with slaves and women, they're the same thing. It's not the same. They just get to use similarly for the same mitzvahs, the same halachas, and so forth. But here, because you have cheresh shota v'katan, so the Gemara feels the cheresh is the same like shota v'katan. Ma shota v'katan glav b'nei deya. Same way that shota v'katan have no sense. Have no understanding, no ability to understand. Cheresh lav bardeyahu. This is the cheresh is also considered lav bardeya. For kamash malan, it comes to tell me keditznan. Cheresh yedibur chachamim chomakom she'eino shomea ve'eino medaber. The cheresh that's mentioned here, when it doesn't tell us what type of cheresh, is a cheresh who is neither can't hear and can't speak. He's completely cut off from all communication and all understanding, right? The story with Helen Keller, right, was the ability to break through to a person, right, who could get that person to communicate in ways which people could not before then. So the cheresh, we're assuming now that the cheresh that is included, that is excluded from being mechayiv and olas riyah, is the cheresh who can't speak and can't hear, which means hamedaber ve'eno shomea ve'eno medaber chayav. Right. Which means, and I say which means because you'll see when we get to the bottom of the page is not what it's going to mean. But for now it means, therefore, that if you have a cheresh who is one or the other, the Gemara is using the term loosely now. It's because I told you that person that can hear and not speak is not called the cheresh. Is really called and Elam, right? Elam.
That's the Elam is which one again?
Elam, he can't speak.
Can't speak, right? Elam,
Right.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but here the Gemara is assuming that cheresh can mean either one of the three: not speaking, not hearing; not speaking and hearing; not hearing and speaking. So
it's interesting because in English, the word which they used to use for a person who couldn't speak,
Zom.
which means no sechel.
Correct. Right. Or maybe a person had no sechel that had nothing to say. I don't know which one came from which. I don't know. But you're right. The two definitely seem to be connected, right? And look, the truth is, without modern abilities to process things like Braille, right, or without
we have sign language. There's all kinds of things that have developed, obviously.
But before that,
people couldn't talk. People couldn't.
I agree. Yeah, no, for
Right.
sure. I'm saying these are all modern developments that allow people.
Right, people who could hear could take in the senses.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't speak.
Right.
Right, and in fact,
Doesn't matter, right?
well, you know what? But writing was not that common, and writing was not that developed.
Oh, for sure.
The common person did not know how to write. The common person hired a letter writer to write. They could read. Okay, we'll have a Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph about two mutes who used to attend the shurim, I think, of Rabbi. And they didn't know what these guys took in and what they didn't take in. And then one day they got cured, and they said they saw they knew everything. So there's no way for them to communicate out.
Right.
But clearly, if you can take in, they just couldn't determine what the person's saying and how the person could communicate. The reverse is much more serious. Person can speak but can't hear, right? So what's he taking in? So he's taking in with his eyesight. But still he can't hear, and it's hard to make sense of what he's seeing. You can think of the silent movies, right, where they had to act things out in pantomime many times to make it clear what was going on.
Look, it was hard to teach words too if you can't hear. So
But
it's
with today's
complicated, right?
technology, Professor Hawkins, for example.
Right.
Yeah, but like you say, modern technology.
Correct. Right. So
So they're saying, but somebody who's only one or the other is chayav. That's where you stop, right?
right. So we're assuming therefore that our Mishnah, when it says cheresh, means a cheresh she'eino medaber ve'eino shomei ve'eino medaber, because it's like a shotev a katan. And if he has one of the two, then he ought to be chayav in bringing the carbon olas riyah,
Right.
being chayav in ola the regel, and being chayav in bringing the carbon olas riyah. So the Gemara says Tanina. We learned this lahad tan rabbanan hamedaber ve'eino shomea zeu cheresh shomea ve'eino da medaber zeu ilaim. Okay, so the Bryce or the Mishnah here or it's a Tosefta really just kind of makes it clear for us that they have different names. But zeh v'zeh hareihem kepechim l'chol devreihem. But really, either of them or both of them are considered to be like a normal person. They can communicate. Whatever we call them, cheresh, elaim, they're able in some form to be communicating and have a connection with the environment around them. Okay? So, and how do I know, by the way, it's called an elaim? So the Gemara digresses for a moment. My the medaber ve'eno shemaya zeh cheresh and shemaya ve'eno medaber zeh elaim. How do I know that the one who can hear but can't, the one who can speak but can't hear is called a cheresh, and the one who can hear but can't speak is called an elaim? Maybe it's the other way around. The chsiv, it says in Tehillim, "Vani kecheresh v'lo eshma, u'ke'ilim lo yipasach piv, v'lo yiftach piv." So David HaMelech is saying that I can't approach Hashem. He says I'm like a deaf person and I can't hear, or like an elam and I can't open my mouth. So you see that an elam is about speaking, being unable to speak, being a mute. The Ibai Seima. And the Gemara gives another answer. The second answer is probably not as good. Second answer is what's called notricon. Notricon is like a very rough abbreviation. Only this abbreviation assumes that the word elam has its origin in Aramaic. Because mimalel, actually mimalel I guess is also Hebrew. Okay, mimalel, right. Correct. So
That's
right.
used in the Targum as the translation for Vayomer or Vayedaber, one or the other.
Correct. It's also used for Tzelem Elokim by the Targum. It says when it talks about Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to make Adam B'Tselem Elokim, so it says Beruach, I think it says Beruach Mamalta, which I believe so.
Aramaic,
Yeah.
translation of scripture.
No, it's not here.
The second paragraph says,
I don't remember that word.
Might not be in Unklis. Might be in the Targum Yonasim and Azil.
Ah.
Okay, it might be in Targum Yonasim and Azil.
Uncle Louis.
All right. Whatever, I can't find it now. Okay. So I think it's Targum, the other Targum, the Targum Yonasim and Azil, talks about it making man as a Ruach Mamalta, a speaking being. Which is really, of course, how we show our intelligence. But let's go back here. So at any rate, so the Gemara says, Kidamri in shape, Ishtakel milule. So Ishtakel means taken away, Shakal. Milule is his dibur. So Elaim is the abbreviated word for Ishtakel milule. Okay? Okay.
Where is this from, he says?
This is a folk saying.
What is it? Some people say.
People say
it's an expression. I got it. It's an expression.
Common expression. This is what he was called. The Shtakim Milule. His speech was taken away from him. Okay, now, so where we're holding at this point assumes that the cheresh, when the Mishnah is a cheresh, eino medaber ve'eino shomeh ve'eino medaber, both of them. Now the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to flip it around. Medaber v'she'eino shomeh shomeh medaber chayiv. This is actually reflecting upon the Bryce that we just quoted. So the Gemara says, v'yatanya medaber ve'eino shomeh ve'eino medaber pater. Okay, we just learned that the cheresh in our Mishnah is a cheresh that's eino shomeh ve'eino medaber.
Right.
But if you had a cheresh that was medaber or a cheresh that was shomea, one or the other, what would be the halacha? Chayav.
Right.
The Gemara says, however, we have a Bryce that says exactly the opposite. That a cheresh that's medaber ve'eino shomea and shomea ve'eino medaber is going to be pater. So you wanted to make a diak based upon the similarity of cheresh shotav v'katan and say therefore it must be cheresh eino medaber ve'eino shomea, which means one or the other would be chayiv. But we have a Bryce that says he's pater.
Right.
So you can't say it's chayiv who says it's pater. So the Gemara is going to say as follows. There are two pieces here in this first couple of words of the Mishnah. It's a little difficult, but it can still fit in. So Amravina v'tema Rava Chisurei mechas v'hachi katani. You have to assume that the Mishnah was written in a concise term. But the term Chisur mechas v'hachi katani comes up in a number of places throughout the Shas. It comes up about 50 places throughout Shas. It's not that uncommon a term, and what it means, it's not the changing the text. Saying that the text is written in a cryptic short form to include a subheading that was not mentioned. In this case, what's the subheading? The Gemara says that there were two things that there are two types of chereshes, and there are two types of karbanos that we'll be talking about, olas riyah and korban chagiga. The korban chagiga, a cheresh, I'll try it again. There are two types of chereshes, eino shomeh ve'eino medaber, and one was one or the other. The eino shomeh ve'eino medaber is he's nothing. Right. He's like equal to a shota. He has no communication. The one who cannot hear but can speak, he's pater from something and chai from something. What's he chai for? He's chai for korban chagiga.
Oh.
What's he going to be pater from? He's going to be pater from olas riyah. The reason he's going to be pater from olas riyah is not because he's a shota, but because he has a certain deficiency based upon drashos we learned from the psukim, that a person who comes up to harabayis has to be able to hear and speak and hear. And if he's deficient in one of those, he can't bring the olas riyah, but not because he's choser seichel, because he's choser dibor, or choser shmi, I should say. right? And the Gemara is going to learn a drasha based upon a comparison to Hakel, which is Laman Yishmu and Laman Yomedun. So based upon that, the Cheresh who's Eino Shmei Medaber is excluded from all Asriya.
And the Chagiga doesn't have to go up to the BAYT to buy it? Where does he?
The Chagiga, no, he does, but a Karban Chagiga is a Karban Chagiga. There's no comparison to learn Riyah.
I see.
Riyah from Hakel, and we'll come to it, but I'm just trying to give you the outline.
Yeah.
We come to see Hakel. In one part about Hakel it says Laman Yishmedu, Laman Yiru, Laman Yishmu. So it talks about seeing or being seen.
Right.
All Asriya says V'lo Yeru Fonai. You have to be seen. You can't be seen empty.
Right.
So the way that one has to is the other one. Chagiga is simply about celebrating the Yom Tov. If you're Jewish and you're Bar Chiyuva, you have to celebrate the Yom Tov. And what does celebrating the Yom Tov mean? Bring a Karban Chagiga.
Right.
So in other words, so what we're trying to say now, let me just tell you how it fits into the Mishnah, and then we'll read the Gemara. What we're trying to say now is when the Mishnah says Hakol Chayavim B'Re'iyah Chutz Mi Cheresh Shod V'Katan, which Cheresh are we excluding?
Right. So you're saying only one of them somehow, right? Or both?
Which Cheresh is going to be excluded from bringing the Karban Olas Riyah?
Right.
The Shomea Ve'eno Medaber, Eno Shomea Ve'eno Medaber, or Eno Shomea U'Medaber? It's a trick question.
But what about the other one?
Both of them. That's the trick answer.
That's what I'm saying.
Those all chereshes, whether a full cheresh who can't speak and can't hear, or a cheresh who can't speak but who cannot hear but can speak, all of them are pater from Olas Riyah.
Right. But the one who's not, the one who can hear though.
Correct. And when we compare the cheresh to shotev katan, that's going to be the corollary the Mishnah doesn't really spell out.
Right.
The Gemara doesn't spell out. When we compare cheresh to shotev katan, it's true and it's not true. It's going to be true for the cheresh who can't speak and can't hear, but it's really not true for the cheresh who can hear but can't speak. He's excluded because of a different reason. So you could say, in other words, that our Mishnah is saying Hakol Chayav Maria Chutz Mi Cheresh Shotev Katan is about the cheresh who can't hear and can't speak, and therefore it's equal to Shotev Katan. Or you could say it's talking about the can't speak and can't hear, and also includes the can't hear and can speak, who's not really equal to a Shotev Katan, but is excluded for other reasons. But he's included in this line in the Mishnah.
Right.
Now, and when the Brisa says, and therefore, and when the Brisa thought to say that he would be chayav,
The Brisa said
it says pater, but when we thought before to say that there's something chayav, we're really saying that included in this first line in the Mishnah, if you want to make a diuk, the diuk would be as follows: Hakol chayav b're'iyah, and also a Karban Chagiga, except for the cheresh shotev katan, right? But a cheresh who is but that's only which cheresh is going to be part from both. Eino shomea ve'eino medaber, can't hear, can't speak. A cheresh who can hear but can't speak would be chayav from the Karban Chagiga. That's the part that's missing in our Mishnah. That's what the Chesur Machasra means. So Ravina and Rava say you have to read the Mishnah in an expansive way, what it really doesn't say, but it really means. Okay?
Very good.
And that's how you get both types of cheresh in there. So I'll read again. Am Ravina Temer Rava. Chisur Machasra Chigitani. Hakol Chayav B'Re'iyah. This is paraphrasing the Mishnah and building the expansion into the Mishnah. Hakol Chayav B'Re'iyah Ubesimcha. Okay?
Yeah.
So it says Karban. It says Shalmei Simcha. Tosas, by the way, says the same thing applies to Karban Chagiga. Okay, so it doesn't say Chagiga here in the Gemara, but it means Shalmei Simcha and the Karban Chagiga. So everybody is chayav in Shalmei Simcha and Karban Chagiga. Chutz mi cheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomea, and shomea ve'eno medaber. Shepater min ariyah, v'yafal pi shepater min ariyah chayav v'simcha. V'she'eno lo shomea v'lo medaber v'shotev v'katan pater af min hasimcha hol uptur mikol mitzvahs hamors b'Torah. So in other words, what we have to put in here, you have to assume that it should be a kol chayav b're'iyah ube simcha, and according to us is ube chagiga. They all three are going together, all there. Why do we mention chagiga and simcha? We don't. We assume it's understood. and except for cheresh, which cheresh is going to be excluded? All chereshes will be excluded from Riyah, but a cheresh who's neither hearing nor speaking is pater from Riyah, Simcha, and Chagiga. But a cheresh is a partial cheresh who can not hear but can't speak, will be chayiv in Simcha and Chagiga.
Right, perfect.
So, and the Shapato Avman Simcha Hol P'tur Mikol Mitzvah Samors B'Torah. So that's how we get it into the Mishnah. So in the end of the day, the Mishnah is talking about both chereshes, and the Mishnah is talking about Riyah, Simcha, and Chagiga.
Right, and it went further at that last few words to say that that person who's both doesn't have to is put from anything in the Torah.
Right.
It's not aseh, no?
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, that's. Or what about Lotas? Maybe he can't learn anything. I don't know. That's a good question.
What?
This implies.
Then he can go killing.
No, this implies why he's part from. He's saying a cheresh enu medaber v'eino shomea.
Yeah, he's
not culpable. It's not that he's permissible to go killing people. He's not culpable.
So he doesn't have a legal obligation.
It's what is called criminally insane. We have the term. What does criminally insane mean? The person's not responsible, right? By the way, insanity is only a legal term, right? But we have that term, and it means a person did a crime. You got to put them away in a mental hospital, or you actually sometimes release them, right? And the same thing here. Not that it's permissible, but the guy's not responsible. It's like a kid. Like today we have young offenders. So the Young Offenders Act does not allow us to name a minor by name. And there are different ways in which they're treated. Why? Because in our society, a young offender or a minor, and a minor is up until how old? 18 or 16? 18?
Yeah. 18.
18, right? 18 is considered, they don't have the maturity to make those right decisions. In the halacha Torah, that decision actually goes back to 13. That's what bar mitzvah is.
So he doesn't put on tefillin?
So he's not obligated in putting on tefillin,
Yeah,
right?
that's what it says.
Because you can't communicate with this person.
Yeah, but let's say he became that way. He was born normal and he lost his. Okay, so he used to put on tefillin.
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
That's
a good question.
If he says he was born normal, but then something happened,
Your status changes.
so that's what he's saying.
The same thing with this. If you go up to Yerushalayim, you're...
No, but what he's saying is the guy always put on tefillin. He still wants to put on tefillin. He didn't lose his brain, let's say, right?
Oh yeah, but people's status can change. People's status can change.
No,
Depending on what? Depending on different circumstances.
So there are actually the question is about the status today, in terms of whether you could, for example, if you had a cheresh can't hear, can you include him for a minyan? Right now, I'm not talking about if he can hear with a hearing aid.
Yeah, for sure.
If he can hear with difficulty, that's not a cheresh. Person who is stone deaf, as we would say.
Someone who can talk, my guess is he probably became deaf during his lifetime, because a person who could never hear could never learn to talk.
Okay.
Unless, today with sign language,
Yeah,
in those
today,
days, in those
So-
days, if you don't hear, how can you talk? You don't know what you
So
can.
he quotes here from the Taz. He says the Taz says you can't include him for a minyan because he doesn't know how to answer Amen. However, he then quotes from the Pri Chodesh, says that if you can set it up that he can see them, he sees when to say Amen. He answers
Like a
Amen.
flag.
He can lip read,
Yeah.
right? Then you give him start for a minyan. Okay. What about Tkiyah Shofar? Eino shomea u'medaber.
Right.
So we're assuming medaber means he can purse his lips, but he can't hear. Okay, so the Shulchan says that a person like this can't be motzei other people yidei chavasam. And the Aruch HaShulchan has a question: a person who can hear but can't speak, but still can be able to purse his lips to blow the shofar, they says that he can be motzei. Shulchan Aruch says he can be motzei. Yeah, that's a different kind of category. But there's but all of these, I think all of these are cheresh and cheresh mileda.
Ah,
Right?
well,
I think
maybe,
they were not able to.
But
born that way.
Right? They're born that way.
Someone who can speak, I still think someone who can speak must have been deaf.
No, it makes sense.
Right.
You wouldn't learn how to speak. You wouldn't know how to speak.
No, but going with what you said, if you could still do it, because
Right.
why
So,
wouldn't, first
right.
of all? But there might be a difference between doing something because you want to do it and you're not being chayav to do it, right? That's another story.
But once again, the key here is the fact that cheresh and shomea can't hear at all.
Right.
Today, this is very, very rare right? That a person like this would be treated this way because there are all kinds of instruments that would create
Not to mention cochlear implants.
minimal hearing. We'll give minimal hearing,
Sure.
right? There's a picture, and it was a group that got funding from UGA. So when the UGA put out the picture years ago, where they would working with the deaf kids. Okay, and we're giving the deaf kids like bar mitzvahs, religious experiences, and they wanted to show them the shofar.
Vibration.
So they had the kids putting their fingers on the shofar. It wasn't Rosh Hashanah, obviously.
Right.
But that was they wanted to give the kids to understand what shofar was. Right. By the way, for the most difficult part of this would be not about whether you include for minyan or don't include for minyan. The issue would be in terms of whether he's a koner or makneh. He can acquire. Whether you can do a bill of sale with this person. If the person is really cheresh eno shmei v'eno medaber, who's like a shota, then the sale is no sale. And the worst case scenario would be in terms of gittin. Can he give a get? Right. So, but once again, these are very rare. By the way, just wanted to say, I've been using Shalmei Simcha and Korban Chagiga as the same thing. And I told you, Tosas says that. Tosas is on the bottom of Bet Madet. It's about the last two lines. Right in the middle of the second last line, probably in your Tosas like me. V'hacha ki kamed machai b'simcha huadin b'chagiga. Okay, and the reason he put in simcha, the Mikid Prashi, el simcha naked the nashim chayavos and chereshot v'kadna pater. So nashim chayavos and shalmei simcha, they made him chayim kamen chagiga. So the mishas simcha. The Rambam, by the way, says differently. The Rambam, the handout, by the way, that I gave you, it's the Rambam handout. Okay, the Rambam in halacha Zayin. It's Zayin, and then it has a dalid in brackets. Okay, Kol achai b'riya chai. Okay, if you don't have it, it's a short line. By the time I find it for you, we'll be finished with it. Okay.
You read something. You read something.
Right.
But it's a whole long line, Zayin. It's not Mishalo Ikriv? No.
No. Kol achai b'riya. There were two types of numeration.
Further down, Kulan, yeah.
Right, okay. Zion, if it follows after that with the dalet in the parentheses or brackets. Kol achai b'riya chai b'chagiga, v'chol ha'pater min ha'riya pater min chagiga. So Rambam seems to say the two of them go together. Chagiga goes together with Riyah. V'kulam chayavim b'simcha chutz micheresh eno shmei v'lo medaber v'shota v'katan v'ar v'tamei. Okay.
So women for sure.
Correct, are chayiv. But I'm saying, but the key is that when our Gemara here talks about simcha, according to Rambam, it's simcha davka. Right. But the cheresh eno shomea umedaber would be pater as well from bringing korban chagiga.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not clear why the two would go together necessarily. Okay. Anyways, back to the Gemara here. So the Gemara says Tanya Nami Hachi, two lines at the bottom of the Gemara. Tanya Nami Hachi, Akol Chaim B'Riya B'Simcha. Once again, you see the Gemara and the Brayso they keep talking about again. Riya and Simcha doesn't mention Chagiga.
Right.
So Tosa says it's included. Rambam says it's not included. Doesn't mention it. It's clearly excluded. Chutz micheresh medaber v'eno shomea shmeino v'eno medaber shepeturim min ha'riya v'yavu b'shepatim min ha'riya chayim v'simcha. Okay. V'sheino lo shomea v'lo medaber v'shota v'katan peturim af min ha'simcha ho'ol peturim mikol mitzvos hamuras b'Torah. Okay. So what we haven't, so that's pretty clear. What we haven't explained, and I kind of hinted to it, is why a cheresh she'eno m'shomea u'medaber, who appears to be chayav for pretty much everything, right? It is considered pikeach, except he has a deficiency he can't hear. Right? Maybe he can't be yotze the mitzvah shofar because he can't hear it. But practically speaking, in terms of das, he's a bar das. Why would he be excluded from bringing an olas riyah? Olas riyah does not require any hearing mechanism. It requires you to walk up to Har HaBayit and bring the korban, right? And that's it. So why would he be excluded? So the Gemara is going to learn out this drash from Hakel. And when we introduced this the Masech, we said, especially in the beginning, there's a lot of drashos that are brought in here to support why the exclusions are. Every exclusion has a reason why it's excluded. Some of them are logical. Cheresh, shota v'katna make sense, or at least the shota. person who can't walk up, makes sense. But some of them are a little oblique. So Gemara says as follows. So, Ma'ishna linyan riyah de petire, u'ma'ishna linyan simcha de mechayve. Well, why is this chera she'ena shomea u'medaber v'kein medaber? Why is he part from olas riyah?
But he's chayav.
Well, his chayav, the fact he's chayav for simcha is really not the question. And then he should be chayav for everything.
Okay.
But why, if he's chayav for simcha, would he be part of riyah? That's really the crux of the question is why is he excluded from olas riyah? What's he doing here, right? We understand but he should be out of it. He should not be included. He should not be excluded. So the Gemara says, "Le'inyan riyah gama riyah mehakel." We learn out from the halach of hakel, which is.
Why hakel?
To explain, Chsiv says hakel es hanashim v'hanashim v'ataf. But the hakel is going to be this year. It's this sukkos. It's this Shmini Atzeres, on the year after Shemitah.
But I'm saying this is a general for Yom Tov. This is hakel is a specific time.
Correct. So it's going to compare because it has a hekesh of one word to another word.
No, the old hekesh.
There's all these. Once again, a lot of these drushes are based upon what look like random words that Chazal had a Masorah, and you have to understand. You have to believe there was a Masorah of some sort. Otherwise, you walk around and say S Vayomer Vaydaber Moshe. You can make this all your whole life.
I just say Kabbalah is sometimes like that. Like Kabbalah, you can give a good shot or give a bad shot, and that's why they say you need a Rebbe for us to go off the derech, because that's what you're doing. You know, that's what you're doing.
They knew the answer.
You know,
correct. What I'm saying is you can build a Kal V'chomer by yourself. Kal V'chomer is logic, but a lot of these drushes really have an underpinning of some Masorah that's based upon them.
I have the same problem.
All right.
Other sorts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Maharal wrote a whole book about trying to explain these difficult chazal. It's called I forgot now. It's been translated into English, by the way, or at least summarized in translation by Art Scroll. I'll tell you next week. I forgot the name.
Yeah.
Okay. Hakel asam, hanashim v'hanashim v'ataf. And so we have men, women, and children are coming up, being told to be brought together. On this is Motzei Shvius on Sukkot. So B'vo Kol Yisrael Le'Ra'os. So we're told when you're going to do this, when the Jewish people come up Le'Ra'os, and that is going to and therefore Le'Ra'os is going to exclude a person
who's blind. No, you would think it only included a blind person. Yeah. I mean, in theory. Unless the word hakel means after. Here you say come together. Maybe hakel involves.
Right. And that's going. Oh, and that and there. So if we stop there, we won't know anything. That would, the rows will just tell you have to be seen. Right. But it doesn't tell me who's being excluded and who's being excluded. V'hasa minalan, how and mit hakel, how do you know that you're going to exclude a partial cheresh from the chiyuv of hakel, of coming to hear the king read Sefer Devarim on the 8th year, on Sukkot, on Shmini Atzeres? The chsiv says, Laman yishmu laman yomadu, which means they'll listen and they will learn, right? V'tanya, this is all about hakel. V'tanya, Laman yishmu prat lemedaber ve'eno shomea, u'laman yilmedu prat leshomea ve'eno medaber.
What is it learning? What's the yilmedu?
So the Gemara is going to explain Laman yilmedu actually means also Laman yilamdu. You have to read it as Laman yilamdu.
What are they teaching?
No, so in other words, that you're coming up to hakel in order to hear, and in order to learn and to teach over. Now, if therefore you cannot hear, the whole purpose of going up for hakel is laman yishmu or laman yilmudu / yilamdu. So if none of that applies to you, then you can't go up. Right? For example, a summa will learn. A blind person can't go up to harab, can't do olas riyah, Because it says real laman.
No, but Uriah is to be.
It says real to be seen. So the same way you can't be seen. If you can't see, you can't be seen. The Gemara makes a comparison. And it says the fact that it's called regalim means a person who can't walk, can't go up. You can't bring him up on a stretcher. Right? When you thought we said a zakein and a chole and a chiger, he can't go up. So put him in a cart, put him on a stretcher, put him in a wagon, schlep him up. The answer is there's an exclusion based upon the drash. It's called regalim or called pa'amim. So he's got to come up on his own steam. It says v'lo yera'u, be seen, and you have to see to be seen. So therefore, summa can't be excluded. So in terms of hakel, when the Torah talks about who is going to go up, it says men, women, and children are going to go up. Hakel asam anashim etaf. V'ger chashem b'sharecha. Why they go up? L'man yishmo, l'man yilmedu, li'ras Hashem Elokechem. They're going to go up. They should hear, and they should learn and teach for all time, for the other people. So if you can't hear...
This once in 7 years, right?
Correct. This is the 8th year. I said it's going to be this Sukkot.
But the other years,
we're talking about the mitzvah of Hakel. This is now the mitzvah of Hakel. Yeah. That on the 8th year, the king.
They go to hear
the king would read Sefer Devarim.
The Torah in his shirt.
He had Torah here.
Yeah.
Had to carry with him. That was this coming week's parsha. This coming week, last week. This coming week. This coming week it talks about the king having Mishnah Torah Sefer. But in terms, whenever it is, it's not important for us. What's important is we're going to learn about Hakel, and then we're going to make a comparison from Hakel to Olas Riyah.
Right.
We haven't gotten that far yet.
No.
So we're right now focusing on Hakel. So we have this long-winded drasha that tells me for Hakel, it says, first of all it says Leiros.
Right.
Bevoko is called Leiros. You right away see where it's going to set up. Leiros is going to be my comparison to Olas Riyah, because there's Laman, what's the term? Man Yiru. Right. Okay, so Yera'eh, it says Laman Yiru. Right? And now for Hakel, we know that you have to hear, and that's an exclusion for the person that can't hear. Right. Not because the person is an imbecile, not because the person is a shota, not because the person is not intellectual, because he can't hear. And the whole purpose of going up to Hakel, for a normal adult male at least, is to be able to hear. Now, we'll talk a little bit about Hakel in the context through the sugya. But right now, so Laman Yishma, Laman Yilmedu. V'tanya, I'm reading again. Laman Yishmedu, Prat Lamedaba Ve'eno Shomea. Laman Yilmedu, Prat L'Shomea Ve'eno Medaber. Right? Mm-hmm. So, which means these two people are excluded. Which means, right, if you can hear, but you can, I already gave you a part of the answer, because I told you Laman Yilmedu is like Yilamdu. Oh. Right, but the exclusion. Let's go over what the exclusion is. Laman Yishmu. If I can't hear, so I understand I'm excluded from Laman Yishmu. Right. But Laman Yilmedu, if I don't read it as Laman Yilamdu, what does Laman Yilmedu mean? To learn. So we wanted to exclude a person who can hear but can't speak.
Right. So
the Gemara's question is going to be: if a person can hear but can't speak, that means they can't learn. It's a rhetorical question. There are probably many cases of people who are mutes who can learn very well. And the Gemara brings the case of the two mutes who are studying in the Beis Medrash of Rabbi. And they didn't know what these guys knew until Rabbi cured them, or the HaKadosh Baruch Hu cured them, and they found they knew everything. So you see that if you can hear but you can't speak, you can still be absorbing all the wisdom of the Almighty.
Sure.
So the Gemara says, "V'chin lo mishtoi lo gomer." If you can't hear, you can't learn. V'ho'ano trei ilmei. There were these two mutes. They have a b'shivavusei the Rebbe. They were in the neighborhood of Rebbe. B'nei Bartzei the Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. or bnei achte de Rabbi Yochanan. They were either the son of the daughter of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gugada, or the son of the sister of Rabbi Yochanan. The Kol Emas Nava'al Rebbe Lebei Medrasha, whenever Rebbe would come into the base Medrash, Havi Ayal V'Yasvei Kamayu. They would sit right there in the front row, sit right in front of Rebbe. V'Menai De B'Rei Shayu, and they would they bob their heads, they would follow what's going on. Umarachin Shiv Sasayu, and they would mouth their lips, they couldn't hear anything. The lips were they couldn't speak.
Talk. These people could hear, but not talk, right?
Right. So Rebbe's there every day. He's trying to give a share, and these two guys are sitting in the front row. They're mouthing lips to themselves, and no one knows what's going on. They had like some kind of secret code between themselves. So Rebbe didn't know, and maybe it was distracting to him, or simply the simple pshat of the Gemara. He had mercy on them. Well, boy, Rebbe rachmi alayu, and Rebbe had mercy, which means he davened for them. He davened, rachmi means he davened for them. The itzu, and they were cured, which means that their muteness was, they were able not to speak. And v'yishtakach dav'gmire hilchasa v'sifrei v'kula shas. They knew hilchas, they knew everything. They knew the Mishnayos, and they knew the Medrash Halacha, the Sifra and the Sifrei, and they knew all the discussions. So if that's the case, you see that a person who can hear but can't speak can learn. Absolutely. So why should a cheresh shomea ve'ena medaber be excluded from hakel? We're still hung up on hakel.
Yeah,
we haven't gone back to Olas Real yet.
No, for sure.
So the Gemara says, Amar Zutra, Karibe or Kribe Lama Yilamdu. Don't read it that nor they should learn, nor they should learn to teach. Right? It's like a stretch, but really is your learning is only going to be helpful if you teach someone else. What we're saying basically, the lilmod is not the lamed, and that you'll become a good learner by speaking, by teaching others. And in fact, if you want to reinforce the learning, you reinforce it by teaching others. So therefore says the Gemara. So Marzutra says, don't read Laman Yomadu, but read as if it's Laman Yomadu, Laman Yilamdu. And therefore, who will be excluded from bringing a korban? Who will be excluded from bringing a korban from Hakel? A cheresh who can hear is excluded from Laman Yishmanu. A cheresh who can't speak is excluded from Laman Yilamdu. Yomadu Yilamdu. Okay. And now I think it's a wild drasha. So Rav Ashi says it's not even Marzutra is not even a misinterpretation of the simple pshat. Rav Ashi marvadai laman yilamduhu. It's for sure you have to read laman yilamdu. Why? The isal gedach laman yomadu. If you just read laman yomadu, kevan lo mishtoi lo gomar, and say, if you can't speak, you can't learn. The kevan lo shama. Lo Gomar, if you can't hear, you can't learn. Hi Laman Yishmu Navka. You can learn all from Laman Yishmu. The Laman Yishmu is telling me the exclusion is because you can't hear, because you can't learn. You should be excluding anyone who can't learn. So if you're really a person who can't speak, right, who can't learn, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. So what does the pasuk tell me? It tells the person even though they can learn because they could hear and they could inculcate and learn everything, but they can't speak, they're also excluded from Hakel. So Levade Levlan Yilamdu. Okay. Now, so where does this leave us? So now that you know the part about Hakel, so the Gemara doesn't spell it out, but the Gemara gave you that one word before, which is the understanding that the word to the comparison is leiros. Levoko is leiraos. And the pasuk that was used in terms of the mitzvah of bringing korban olas riyah was v'lo yera'u fonai rekam. So yera'u and yera'eh, leiros, is all the same kind of term, and therefore that's the drash or the comparison between the two. If therefore you are excluded from bringing from going for hakel, you're going to be excluded from olas riyah, right? That's the comparison.
So riyah again is riyah and hakel again.
So it's a comparison of the fact that hakel begins talking about riyah, and there's really no reason to talk about riyah in the midst of hakel. It says bevol koisol leiraos.
Right.
In fact, what the Torah is actually saying is the mitzvah of hakel is done when people come for the mitzvah of yerayah. That's what the pasuk is. Pasuk is not saying that Hakel is Yeraya. When are you going to do the mitzvah of Hakel? B'vol kol Yisrael liros. When you come to do the mitzvah of Yeraya. So what we're really saying is whoever does one does the other. When they come to do one, they'll do the other. If you can't do one, if you can't do the other, you can't do the one. So the drush itself sounds like it's a little outlandish, but the comparison is pretty good. They go hand in hand. What are you going to say to the guy? You came here for Riyah, and we're doing Hakel, which is while you're here for Riyah, but you can't do Hakel. It makes no sense. And if you can't do Hakel, then you can't do Riyah. Right. That's the drush that's there. And if you think it's not simple pshat, it may not be simple pshat, but there is somehow a Masorah that's based upon it underneath it.
The part that we didn't deal with, of course, is it says the women and the children should come too. Right? So in theory, that's what it said. Hakel, that's Nashim Batav. At the beginning, right? We just read Hakel, so, and yet they're all excluded, I guess, by our Mishnah, of course, or in general. So I guess it's from somewhere else that they... Right, because it says Ishmael Ve'Lamod, I guess.
Right, so I think it's a little bit later. So the reason why the women come, so Gemara says, it's here in the Gemara somewhere.
They come. Okay, no, if it's later though, I said as long as we deal with
the Gemara will talk. It's a very famous drush. The Gemara says, okay, we know why the men come. The men come for the mitzvah of Hakel, and then they follow us Riyah. What are the women coming from? So the women are there to bring the children. Be careful how you say this in the modern audience. Yeah. So where are the children coming from? So children are coming to give the schar for those who bring them. There's a purpose to bring a child, even if they don't understand fully what the mitzvah of Hakel fully is. So I can't remember. It's going to come up a little bit later on or later on. Yeah. It's at the bottom here, at the bottom. Okay.
Yeah. Because we said that the women.
It's right at the very bottom. It's the bottom of this Talmud here.
So the women are coming on their own.
The women are coming really to.
I'm saying that the men are already there, right? They're there for service.
Actually, it says Nashim. Gemara says Nashim Baim Lilmod, Nashim Bos Lishmoa. They come actually to here,
right?
Okay? And Tav come Litain Schal Meviim. Then not the women are bringing the children. Nashim Bos Lishmoa. Okay, it's about 4 lines.
They don't have the obligation to learn, but
they have the obligation to learn. They have the obligation to hear what it is.
Yeah, listen.
Okay, good. Okay. Right.
All the questions they're all asked.
They all eventually come back. Okay, so this is in terms of the cheresh. Right. Mm-hmm. Now the Gemara has a question. Rabbi Tanchum, cheresh bi'ozno achas, or it's not a question actually. Cheresh bi'ozno achas patim in ariyah. Okay. Okay, so he now includes even a person who's deaf in 1 ear. Okay. Right. Why? Shenema bi'oznehem.
Where's it say?
That's a Hakel quote. That's Hakel. So Ba'aznehem, now obviously a simple pshat the Gemara is going to say, Ba'aznehem is everybody.
Plural of people.
The plural of people, correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
Plural of ears.
That's not plural. Plural of people.
Yeah, there's a whole group of people. So all these people come so they can hear with their ears, right?
People
Right.
Also,
problems with the Jews.
Where is it? It's in
plural of ears.
Where does he say Dvarim Lamed Aleph?
Okay.
He says Yud Bet.
Kei Sheva Shanim B'Moed V'Shnat HaShemida B'Chag HaSukkos V'Vo Kol Yisrael Le'Ra'os Esnei Hashem Elokecha.
Right.
Okay. Clearly they're coming for the mitzvah of Re'iyah during Chag HaSukkos. V'Mokom Asher Tiv Yivchar. Tikwas HaTorah Zos Neged Kol Yisrael B'Oznehem. Hakel Asama Nashim Nashim Atav Gerchash B'Shrecha L'man Yishmu L'man Yilmedu V'Yoros Hashem Lakecha V'Shem L'Asos etc. Okay. So the simple pshat of name is everybody. Gemara's going to ask that question. Let's hopefully we can get to it right now. So Shenam V'Yoznehem. So Gemara says Hi V'Yoznehem Yibayle V'Yoznehem the Kuli Yisrael. That means Oznehem doesn't mean Oznehem everybody's got to have 2 ears.
Right.
It means all the ears of here and all the ears of the Jewish people. So Gemara says, "Ahumi neged kol Yisrael." Where does it say? It says, "B'makom Hashem chart cross Torah zos neged kol Yisrael b'oznehem." If I want to tell me that everybody's got to hear it, I don't have to have b'oznehem. I say neged kol Yisrael. Right. So what's b'oznehem must mean? In all of the ears of every single person that's neged kol Yisrael in all of the ears.
If you didn't have those names, then a deaf person could come. That's how I read it.
Okay, well let's do the whole drush because it goes back and forth.
Okay.
So Gemara says, "Imi negi Yisrael hava mina alpha pid lo shame." So Gemara says, it's not true. If I only had negative koisol without us nehem, forget the deaf person. But maybe if people weren't listening. Wait, what if I wasn't? What if I closed my ears? So kos rachmana be oz nehem. V'hu the shame. Avagav lo shame, avagav lo shame. So kos rachmana be oz nehem. V'hu the shame. Hahu milaman yishmuna. V'hu the shame.
What's the Afghan there?
So in other words, it has to tell me if I only had neged kol Yisrael, I would think even if they're not listening. So after was named to tell me that everybody's got to be there in front of everybody, everybody's got to be listening. So Gemara says, and therefore I don't have Yaz Nehem extra to teach me that I need both ears for every person. I can't exclude a cheresh in one ear. So Gemara says, Ahu milaman yishmu. No, I don't really need the word Yaz Nehem because it learned from this, and there's a bit of a difficulty because we already used Laman Yishmu to exclude a cheresh she'eino shomea.
Right.
And now comes Rav Tanchum, and this is what the Rishonim explain. This looks like Rav Tanchum does not agree with the previous piece of Gemara we just finished, because he says Laman Yishmu tells me that I have to hear it. So it's a funny kind of exclusion. It looks like Rabbi Tanchum is saying that I'm using Laman Yishmu, and notice it gets a little complicated. I'm using Laman Yishmu to exclude, to say that everybody's got to be there to pay attention in order to hear. Because Nehem excludes a cheresh who is deaf in one ear, but a cheresh, but I'm not excluding a cheresh who can hear and speak. So it must be a cheresh who's deaf in one ear and can't speak. That's how a lot of the Rishonim try to say the only way to make sense is because you can't use Laman Yishmu because you just use Laman Yishmu 10 lines before to exclude the cheresh and Oshmei ben Amanah ben Mudaber. You can only use one drush one time around. Correct. Okay. So that's at any rate, that's the part about cheresh. Okay, now we have a few minutes. We'll just start. The next piece talks about who's the next guy in this mission, this list of the Mishnah. Cheresh, Shota v'Katan. Where Shota v'Katan, there's nothing to talk about. The Shota, the Katan, we're going to talk about later in the Gemara. We talk about carrying this kid. So is the kid Chai? Is the kid bar mitzvah, not bar mitzvah? So obviously, is a kid who is Chai if he can walk. So which Katan is excluded, which Katan is not? Tumtum and adroitness we're not going to deal with right away, but we're going to. And Avodim Shem Shachron we talked about last week. So the next person on the list is Chagiga. Okay, Chagiga is a person who's lame. Okay, now there are two types of people we're going to differentiate in this Gemara: a person who's lame who can't walk, and a person who has a peg leg. Okay, a person who has an artificial limb. A person with an artificial limb can walk.
Absolutely.
Right? A person who's lame can't walk. A person who's lame, right? The person can have all their limbs, but they could either be paralyzed, or they could be unable to walk, or they have they're transported in a wheelchair or something.
Whatever.
Right? A person who walks around with an amputated limb is also going to be excluded for a different reason. Why? You can just imagine even before we get to it. He doesn't have his proper shalosh regalim. He doesn't have 3 feet. He doesn't have 2 feet. So in other words, they're excluded for really different parts, different ends of the same kind of concept. One can't walk, and one can't walk on his own legs. Okay, tisk. I heard that. Okay. Now, so says the Gemara. We'll start this because I'm Rav Tanchum. So we have one Rav Tanchum which talked about cheresh be'achas na'achas. Chagiga b'ral glo achas patim and ariyah. Okay, a chagiga, a person who's lame, even only one leg. Right? Obviously, a person who's lame in both legs is not an issue. He can't get up there. If he's lame in one leg, what does that mean?
And does this riyah also exclude the other two, or no? He still goes with our basic assumption they just still have Chagiga, let's say, and stuff.
Because he still has Chagiga and he still has Simcha, correct? Right. So Shenema Regalim. Okay? So Regalim says Shalosh Regalim. Regalim is plural. Even though it means the 3 holidays, but it means, okay.
Yeah, maybe it applies to the holidays, not to the feet.
The third one could be.
So wait.
That's what I meant.
I know what you meant.
So the
That's what I'm saying.
Rishonim asked the fact that it's obviously talking about holidays, right?
Shimshon's-
So there's a change in the terminology. It says shalosh pamim bashana.
Right.
So the two terms are used interchangeably. We talk about the shalosh regalim, but in a couple of places in Torah, the shalosh pamim bashana yirah kol zchurcha.
Right, yeah.
So what's pamim? 3 times. So what's pamim and regalim? If a palm it refers to the times of the holidays, so what's regalim? So it must be that the Torah goes out of its way to include regalim, and we call them pilgrimage festivals.